Welcome to another edition of the Meet the Visionaries podcast. My name is Monisha Nasa, and I'm a graduate student at the MIT Center for Real Estate. Today, we're joined by a true pioneer in the digital infrastructure space, Hossein Fateh. Hossein is the founder and chief executive officer of Cloud Capital and CloudHQ. He brings over 25 years of experience developing and operating world-class data centers. Prior to Cloud Capital and CloudHQ, Hossein co-founded and served as the CEO of DuPont Fabros Technology, a company he successfully led to a $7.8 billion acquisition in 2016. Across his career, Hossein has built and operated over 2,000 megawatts of data center capacity worldwide. Today, under his leadership, Cloud Capital manages a global portfolio of 26 data center assets valued at over $6 billion. We're thrilled to have him here to discuss capital formation, underwriting strategies, and the future of digital infrastructure. Hossein, thank you for joining the discussion today. You co-founded DuPont Fabros Technology, led it as CEO, and ultimately saw it acquired for $7.8 billion in 2016. What was the core catalyst for transitioning from DFT to CloudHQ and Cloud Capital?
Thank you for having me. The original REIT model that I helped co-found, in that I was the first person in the US to get a IRS private letter ruling qualifying data centers as good REIT income, I realized does not necessarily work well for development. What REITs work very well for income producing assets. And your valuation is for the most part based on the income stream that is that is not taxable. And so there's only one level of taxation, not one at the company and one personal. You only pay taxes on your dividend, on your income as an owner of the shares. But the model does not work well for developing land, buying land, getting the power. Sometimes getting the power takes way longer than you may think. It could take multiple years. You also need to connect it with fiber optics to a central point. And then sometimes you're delayed because of environmental permits. Sometimes permits, like in Germany, it takes at least 2 years to get a building permit. Mm-hmm. So REITs don't do well in that. REITs work well as a yield co. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily work well as a development co. Essentially, what I did was copy one of your benefactors, Hamid Muqaddam. Prologis' model is whereby Prologis, the public company, is a development company. Of course, they own multiple assets as well, but then they sell those assets to pension funds and institutions that then hold them long term for income producing assets. Mm-hmm. So for me, the second part of our business is Cloud Capital, which is more the long term owner of the assets, and CloudHQ, for the most part, is the development company. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's some assets that we don't sell for various tax reasons, but CloudHQ also, we hold assets, and that, to go more into the tax angle of it, we can depreciate the assets in an accelerated way. So the assets that you do sell are offset with the depreciation of the assets you keep.
Gotcha.
So you optimize on those taxes as well.
So across your career, you have built more than 2,000 megawatts of data centers globally. How has your overarching approach to capital formation and scaling platforms changed as the industry moved from cloud to AI?
Well, from cloud to AI, that's a very specific question. The approach has changed because, well, AI is a very recent thing in that the capital, I think your question is several-fold. The capital formation without AI has developed in that as internet speeds increase over time, more and more applications are formed.
Yeah.
2004, you're at search wars. 2007, social media. 2010, fiber to the house. Fiber to the house means Netflix,
Yep.
Fortnite. Then 2013 is the public cloud.
Yeah.
The public cloud is whereby if you invent Uber, and around that time, because 5G came along,
Yeah.
then with 5G, Uber geolocation, that you can find the Starbucks at any corner, find where you're going, those applications all go into the public cloud. So the public cloud became more of a utility in that you can rent compute and storage and not own the servers yourself. That's Amazon, AWS, Microsoft Azure, Oracle Cloud, Google Cloud.
Yeah.
That was the massive shift, right? Then when companies started that go on your handheld phone, all those applications go in the public cloud.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Right? It's faster for them to grow.
Yeah.
Now, to go on your second part, now, as that happened, the size of the data centers that we were building grew. In 2006, the biggest data center in the world was single asset, was 36 megawatts of load, IT load.
Yeah.
Now, my latest deal with one tenant is 315 megawatts of IT load.
Yeah.
Right? So that has grown from 2000, in a 20-year time frame, going from almost a 10x in the size of the single transactions we're having. The 315 would have been 1,000 had I not run out of power on a single deal. Then came AI. The AI produced two other dynamics because you need training and you need inference. Because everything was going around, 8, 10 kilowatts a rack. Then the latest racks were 12 to 14 for the conventional public cloud. The AI element of it, whether it's training or inference, the training can go anywhere. And meaning typically anywhere in America, although some of the AI companies are looking at stable countries outside of America.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to Brazil necessarily if the president is talking about nationalizing data centers. And I have sites in Brazil, so I'd love the president not to say that. So you're not going to make that investment if there's country risk. But training is really a very different piece of real estate. What we're not sure of is the residual land value once the lease is over.
Yeah.
Right? How credible is that data center after 20 years?
Yeah.
Does the tenant want to renew? If they don't, you kind of want to pay down your debt to have very minimal debt at the end of the 20 years. because you're not sure about location.
Yeah.
Because then you're just taking credit risk.
Right.
Right? If the credit is Meta, you're taking Meta. Microsoft is Microsoft. If the credit is non-investment grade, IG, then you really want to pay down the risk, because they could also have the risk of them going out of business during the term of the risk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but you also have inference, which is for the most part going in the public clouds. A lot of inference is going in the public clouds. Inference needs to be closer into population centers.
Yeah.
So then those are the applications that are growing. And it could be that the market for inference becomes 5 or 10x the market for training.
Yeah.
So again, we're back to real estate 101, location.
At the DCD conference in New York this week, somebody said we might see as many inference data centers as hair salons in the future.
Well, I would put it, I don't think, that there are edge data centers. To me, that's a different thing. Edge is, for us, is more of content delivery. Mm-hmm. It's almost Akamai's business.
Yeah.
Right? Whereby if you're following Messi, or someone could be following Kim Kardashian, that Instagram account needs to be replicated all around the US. So if you're in North Dakota, you may have a edge data center that is that. Maybe they were talking about that kind of hair salon, right? That's an edge, so it's content delivery. So the most popular amounts of the most popular Instagram accounts or TikTok or whatever it is need to have closer to the end customer who is looking up Messi in North Dakota.
Wow.
However, the inference, what I'm seeing, a lot of it is going in the locations where the public cloud is.
Gotcha.
Ashburn, Chicago, Dallas, San Jose.
Yeah.
So those are the bigger locations for inference. So like any kind of real estate, need to look at the application being run, how sensitive that application is to latency.
Got it. So is your strategy shifting as we're starting to see more inference data centers for where you geographically?
We have not done core data centers for training yet. And I say yet because we've looked at many. They are more difficult to finance. The credit risks, there are credit risks associated with if you want to do a deal directly with a non-investment grade, and you could name them, they're all well-known companies, non-investment grade AI companies, how do you finance that? A 240 megawatt data center can cost just the data center alone, without the chips, more than $3 billion. How do you raise $3 billion of debt on non-IG credit? Those are the things that we're thinking through. Mm-hmm. It's been well documented how Blue Owl did it. They got a residual guarantee even from Meta. They got a residual guarantee that at the end of the lease, we'll have this guarantee if you don't renew the lease, which made absolute sense.
Yeah.
Right? So for us, there's also challenges with if you do a credit tenant lease, you have to amortize the lease through the period of the term. then your Finance 102 or 101 will tell you in an amortization schedule the debt will sweep all the cash flow, right? So you have no cash flow left for yourself because you get all the cash flow up front because it's a credit tenant lease.
Yep.
And when it sweeps on a 20-year deal, around year 8, you have phantom income.
Yeah.
Phantom income is when your amortization becomes bigger than your debt service. Your debt service offsets your amortization. But if the bank is sweeping, the amount your amortization minus your debt service, there's an amount left when your amortization is bigger. You're paying taxes on that income without having the money for it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to think about. That becomes, again, a financing challenge.
Yeah. We haven't seen a full investment cycles. It's still
We
a
haven't.
big question mark what happens at the end of that 20-year.
Yeah, but I have seen it on data centers in Northern Virginia. There's a very nice data center that I used to own. I remember the address, 1780 Business Center Drive, 13 megawatts. We owned it when I was CEO of DFT. I bought it in the bankruptcy of AboveNet. And that building, 13 megawatts, sits on the most dense fiber that road probably in the US, because it's right on the Dulles Toll Road by Reston. And so there's more fiber on the ground there than anywhere. That building right now would work. Digital Realty owns it. That building right now would work extremely well as a content delivery edge site, because also those network dense buildings don't necessarily need huge GPUs. They're mostly cloud, so you don't need the density. So if the building leases triple net, and the building, so it means it's probably going to be well maintained because the landlord's not cutting corners. And if there is CapEx recapture clause in the leases, that is a really valuable building that I'd like to own again 22 years after I had owned it. But again, it becomes who's maintained it and what location it is.
Yeah.
So the cycle has come around on good assets in great locations, and I give those assets great credit, and I'd like to own those again. But what has not come full circle is that training assets in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's right. So on that note, technology is changing so rapidly. How do you strategize for technical obsolescence in your assets?
Okay. We've thought about this question a lot. We have to first assume that computers will continue to need electricity. I believe so because right now what we've seen is rack densities increase. There are rack densities that were 6 kilowatts a rack 20 years ago that have gone to 12 kilowatts a rack to 14. When the market has moved to GPUs, they could be, you're seeing 20, 30, 40 kilowatts a rack. There's talk of 180 kilowatts a rack. There's talk of a megawatt rack coming. Those assets will need liquid cooling.
Yeah.
And with liquid cooling, almost all the data centers that I have built, except one, have water. And the water does not need to be evaporative. The water could be a closed loop to air or a closed loop with some evaporation, depending on the access to water or not access to water. So if water is in the building and we can tap the water in the building because the water is going in the chilled water system anyway. We bring that water to the computer room floor or to the gallery on the side. There is a CDU, which is essentially a heat exchanger and a pump. The heat exchanger gets the cold water, the hot water from the rack, which is and that's the type of water is dictated by NVIDIA, that goes inside those pipes. The hot water gets to the heat exchanger, which is essentially two plates, and there's a stainless steel pump that turns it. The two waters don't mix, but at that time, the rack densities have got so much that you have space in the computer room floor to put the CDU.
Yeah.
So we can convert, except one building that I have that is air that doesn't have water, that is not closed loop. Everything else has water in it, and those buildings could very easily be adapted because you're going to have the room for the CDUs.
Yeah, yeah. On that note, power requirements. Currently, our grid supports 36 gigawatts, and it's projected that 2030 will require additional 47 gigawatts. How does your investment thesis price in the shift towards alternative behind-the-meter power?
It's very possible. You are absolutely correct. Power is the limiting factor. But it's not. First of all, data centers that we build also can produce power. Okay. There's an interesting article I recently read in Fortune, and I do support it. I'll give you the edits later, in that if we can, there's something called load shedding. So if the grid calls us and we drop load and go on generator, whether those generators are diesel, they could be tier 4 diesel generators. Tier 4 diesel generators produce as much toxin as an 18-wheeler truck, which, even if you have 100 generators, you have 100 trucks on the road, and they only go off at 1%, you're talking 80 hours a year, and they may only go on 0.5%. That's all we need, because our grid right now is underinvested.
Yeah. Like
many investments in the US, we are way underinvested in our infrastructure. Just try flying through Kennedy Airport. Right? It's like a joke compared to some of the Asian countries.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so, if our grid is not strong enough, but data centers, you could argue, can actually support the grid, in that we become the opposite of a peaker plant. That we drop load, the load picks up, and we give the load, because data center loads are steady. And so you could also argue with our steady loads, like Dominion Virginia Power gets to, by regulatory law, gets to invest and make a return of 9.8% return on their investment. But their investment in a data center with steady load pays so much better than their investment for the public. Now, by regulatory, that 9.8% is not divided.
Yeah.
But maybe it should be. So we have gotten a lot of press, bad press, unjustifiably so, because I have a study being conducted that we could actually be saving the ratepayers money. We use a lot, but our return on investment is really helping them, because we have steady load where the general public is up and down.
Yeah.
it makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
So you're right in that the third option is going behind the meter. At the moment, it's possible and it's expensive. And actually, you have combined cycle generator, which takes the heat and puts the heat back in, and that's a more efficient generator from natural gas. Or there's a straight generator that doesn't capture the heat. The combined cycle ones, they're 3 to 4 year waiting list to even get them. And to amortize the cost right now, it's coming to 16 cents a kilowatt to even try and get there. So it's expensive. And the straight generators, they do produce some NOx, and they do produce more NOx than the combined cycle. And then the other challenge is, if you've got massive generators, the big ones that are really efficient, they can't work less than 50%. So then how do you commission a data center piece by piece? If you're trying to test one piece, go to the other, then you need time to fill the data centers with servers. You need to fill at least 50% up, test it all, and then put the generator on. So it's going to work way better if there is a combination of grid and behind the meter. To do just behind the meter, then you'll need multiple types of generators because you're going to need smaller loads as well.
You also co-founded WindHQ, a wind farm developer serving tech companies. How has your work in renewables shaped your long-term power strategy?
I think it was like a learning experience. We have the place where we're in the Texas Panhandle doesn't have enough cables to get the power to San Antonio, to Dallas, to Austin, to where the population centers are. So power in those areas is stranded. And that's why a lot of the Bitcoin mining and a lot of the training has gone to those areas.
Yeah.
Because of the stranded power.
Yeah.
And so for us, the investment, we're mining some Bitcoin and selling the rest of the power into the grid. It's been more of a learning experience than a huge moneymaker for us.
CloudHQ is developing across several geographies: North America, Europe, Japan,
Asia.
Yes, Brazil and Mexico.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges you face when developing in all these different geographies? And looking ahead, where do you see CloudHQ expanding geographically?
Several questions you're asking. The first one, the several challenges, is finding the right people. For the right deal, the money is always available. The right people are always not available, and training the right people to blend in with our friendly, fun, creative culture is challenging. We have an extremely good retention rate, so we have not had, and we give, when someone becomes a partner, they get equity. So unless someone really wants to retire or they get sick, I can tell you that we've never or almost never have had a partner leave, because by the time they get to partner, they're extremely well compensated, and they get to join a round table and have a voice at the round table. And so it's a very pleasant environment. So our challenge is finding that right person internationally. And then, or in the US, anywhere, finding the right people. Internationally, how we have been most successful at it is hiring as many locals as possible, not necessarily having Americans work telling English people what to do, or Americans telling French people, or Americans telling Japanese people. We almost need to hire locals everywhere. I call the Japanese Vulcans. I call the Germans Romulans, the Thai Ferengi, the all these different, they have different names because they're all intelligent races, but culturally, unless we understand that race, a Vulcan is as intelligent, maybe not as a human, but unless you really understand their culture, it's hard to work with them. So our solution has been hiring our own Vulcans and then working with them directly in that local market.
Well said. So competition for premium sites is intensifying, particularly in Northern Virginia, where you have a large footprint. How is your investment strategy evolving to maintain competitive edge in securing the right sites and assets?
It's become really difficult. It's become really, really difficult and capital intensive. And it's not just the right sites. In the last 12 months, the utilities have requested really large deposits and really large commitments, and we have to commit to minimum power draws. So that has made it difficult. Being first mover and taking higher risk is one of the only solutions. And we did that very successfully in Europe when I moved to Europe in 2016. But now, even in Europe, that has become more difficult. So we have to be more creative and, unfortunately, take more risk.
Or fortunately.
Unfortunately,
Yeah. Looking ahead, what makes you hopeful about the evolution of the digital infrastructure market? Do you have any calls to action?
I think we need to do a better job in our public image in presenting our case. And for example, in Northern Virginia, 2.5% of the land area is producing 38% of the taxes. That's massive. Loudoun County has better schools. Loudoun County has better roads. Loudoun County citizens are paying less real estate taxes because 2.5% of the land mass is producing 38%. Now, the downside of it is that, data centers don't produce school kids, so it's not residential, so we don't put tax on the economy or they need more schools. We don't produce much traffic, so we're not putting traffic on the roads. That's a positive. The negatives are that there are some power lines, so you have to avoid putting residential next to power lines, and you have to be careful of not putting residential next to data centers. If the generators, typically, at least the ones I build, their air conditioning systems don't have noise. But for the 10 hours a year that generators may go off, and hopefully for testing, they don't really go off all at the same time in case the power drops, then they do make noise. So you want to avoid being too close to them. So, but if you do a correct zoning plan and be away from them, they could add a huge benefit, because a lot of the public that is funded against data centers is like the Piedmont Environmental Council. The Piedmont Environmental Council, I jokingly say, that is funded by the people that love horses. Okay, the people that love horses are these very rich Teresa Himes, the very rich families that have massive estates in the rural parts of Virginia. They don't want data centers. They're better funded than what our data center coalition is working. But then Teresa Himes doesn't send her grandchildren to public schools.
Yeah.
Right? So she's fighting us, but the general benefits is not easy to read.
Yeah.
And we have done a very poor job in our industry as pointing to the fact that our power loads are flat, pointing to the time that we could be helping the ratepayers, pointing to the fact that, look, we can provide big amount of taxes for a very small area of the land use, and that we don't put pressure, traffic and schools into the area. So jurisdictions, many countries are courting us to go there, but the areas that we're in, we're getting bad press, and a lot of it is, in my thought, is not deserved.
You're right. It's all about education.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the report about comparing data center water use to In-N-Out Burger.
Yeah, look, if the data, I didn't see that, but there's a lot of misinformation coming on. In England, there was a report by a government agency that said, if you want to save water, delete your emails. Just not true.
Yeah, no progress.
No, it's just not true. And I called the agency because we're building one of the biggest data set campuses in England, and said, look, as a public company, when I used to run a public company, if there's a false statement, you immediately have to issue a K1 and say, this was a false statement, I'm sorry, and correct yourself.
Yeah.
The answer from the government officials was, we're not a public company, we don't need to correct ourselves. So, which is, again, it's not true in that on a closed loop data center, there is no water usage.
Yeah.
Okay. When you do evaporate water, your cooling actually becomes almost 50% more efficient.
Right.
Right. But there are some areas in Northern Virginia, we're using recycled sewage water. We're actually helping. The recycled sewage water we're taking it out, we're using it, and then putting 20% of it back in the sewage, 80% of it evaporates. So we're actually benefiting that, and then we're still not getting credit, right? So you have to segment. In some areas, there's so much water, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So water is like electricity, is a utility, and if it's used correctly, there is no downside. And in fact, it could have an upside. The other thing to think about in data centers is, look, you can blame big data, but this is not my data. This is your data. It's your children's data. This is your emails. This is the public's data. It's the questions you ask ChatGPT. It's not my questions.
Exactly.
This is what the society wants, and what we're doing is we are creating the most efficient trains, vehicles to house that data. When I go to France and they say, we don't want big American companies, I'm like, well, this is not American data. This is your French data that we're housing. So you can't blame the American companies when countries have data sovereignty laws for a large part. It's that country's data, it's your kids' data, your kids' Instagram. Try taking your phone away. The best punishment the parent can do to a kid is, I'm confiscating your phone. So it's not my data, it's the public's data.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're going to keep producing more of it.
More of it. And it's not
More is
going,
coming.
more is coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Hossein, thank you for joining us today. This was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Happy to come back anytime.
Thank you.